The ward was silent, yet heavy with an unseen weight. The lights above flickered with a dull blue glow, casting long shadows across the metal walls. It was not a place of healing, but a place of secrets. Every door was locked with heavy steel. Every corridor smelled of medicine mixed with fear. The patients here did not speak much, and even when they did, their words were drowned by the sound of alarms and guards marching past. Daniel, a young human doctor, walked slowly down the corridor, his steps echoing in the silence. He had been assigned to this strange place by the Interstellar Medical Corps, told it was a hospital for alien minds that had broken under the weight of war. But Daniel already knew something was wrong. This was not a normal ward. Too many guards stood outside the doors, too many cameras pointed at the cells, and too many reports came stamped with red marks that read classified. At the end of the hall stood a door larger than the rest, cold and sealed with 2 locks instead of 1. 2 alien wardens stood there, tall figures with silver skin and eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. They looked at Daniel with suspicion every time he passed. Behind that door, they whispered, was the most dangerous patient. A patient no one was allowed to visit unless ordered directly. Daniel had heard rumors, of course. Some said it was a soldier who had gone mad after losing a psychic battle. Others said it was a prophet who spoke of things that had not yet happened. But the strangest rumor of all was the one he had overheard from 2 janitors one night. They claimed the patient was not insane at all, but an alien princess, betrayed and locked away to be forgotten. Daniel did not believe it at first, but something inside him began to grow restless. Why would they place a doctor like him here, so young and inexperienced, unless they wanted him to see something others could not? Every time he walked past that door, he felt eyes watching him from the other side. Not angry eyes, not mad eyes, but pleading eyes. And though the walls were thick, sometimes he thought he heard a faint whisper, soft as a dying flame, calling for help. One evening, when the ward was quieter than usual, Daniel stopped near the door. The guards were gone for their meal. The corridor was empty. He leaned closer, pretending to check his datapad. That was when he heard it clearly for the first time. A voice, soft and fragile, speaking in a language he did not know, yet somehow he understood. "Please, help me," the voice whispered. Daniel's heart skipped. It was not madness, not a cry of rage or confusion, but the voice of someone desperate and sane. He pulled back quickly, afraid someone might have seen him. His hands shook as he walked away, but his mind would not let go of the sound. The voice stayed with him, echoing in his head long after he had returned to his quarters. Sleep refused to come that night. When he closed his eyes, he saw her, though he had never laid eyes on her. He imagined her chained, silenced, forgotten, and always that whisper returned, asking for help. The next morning, Daniel could not focus on his work. The other patients seemed normal in their sickness, their conditions clear. But the princess, if she truly was one, was different. The ward had become a cage, not a place of healing. And Daniel felt like he had been placed inside that cage. Too, not as a doctor, but as a witness, someone who was not supposed to act, only to watch. That night, the whispers came again. This time they were stronger, as if the patient knew he was listening. Human. "Please, I am not mad. They fear me," the voice said. Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to answer, but he dared not speak aloud. Instead, he pressed his hand against the cold metal wall, as if to say, "I hear you." And for a moment, he thought he felt a faint warmth from the other side, as though another hand pressed back. From that moment on, Daniel knew he could not ignore her. This was no ordinary patient. This was no ordinary hospital. The aliens guarding her were hiding something far greater than sickness. The whisper in the ward was not madness, it was a cry for freedom, and Daniel, though only a human among stronger beings, felt the spark of courage awaken inside him. The ward had been silent for so long, but now its silence carried a secret, and Daniel was the only one who dared to listen. The next morning, Daniel walked the same corridor again. But now every step felt heavier. The whisper from the night before haunted him like a shadow that refused to fade. He carried his medical reports in one hand, but his eyes kept drifting to that locked door at the end of the hall. The two silver-skinned guards were already there, standing still as statues, their glowing eyes fixed on him as though they could read his thoughts. Daniel forced himself to walk past, but his mind was not on his duties. Every patient he examined seemed ordinary in their suffering, their illnesses explained by trauma or genetic flaws. But the princess, if that voice truly belonged to her, did not sound broken. She sounded trapped, intelligent, and desperate to be heard. That single truth unsettled him more than any madness ever could. Later, in the staff chamber, Daniel dared to ask one of the alien supervisors about the locked cell. The alien's face turned cold, his metallic skin shifting with irritation. "That patient is unstable," he said flatly. "She speaks lies, dangerous lies. You must not listen." Daniel nodded quickly, but inside, doubt twisted deeper. Why warn him not to listen unless they feared the truth? As the days passed, Daniel began noticing small details others ignored. The heavy dosage of suppressants in her medical file, far stronger than what any normal patient would need. The repeated notes that said "do not reduce medication under any circumstance," written in bold red. The fact that every report about her was stamped top secret, as if she were not a patient at all but a prisoner. And then there was the strange writing scratched faintly on the wall outside her chamber. Hidden under layers of paint, Daniel saw it when the light flickered. 3 words carved by a desperate hand. "She must not awaken." The phrase chilled him. What did it mean? Awaken? Awaken from madness? Or awaken to some greater truth? The doubt inside him grew stronger, louder. Like a storm forming in his chest, he began to dream of her voice, soft yet commanding. Sometimes he thought he could even see her face in his mind, a figure with luminous eyes staring back at him through the darkness. One night, while checking on another patient, Daniel noticed movement near the locked chamber. One of the guards had stepped away, leaving the door under the watch of only a single warden. The princess's voice slipped through the crack of silence, faint but clear. "Human. Why do you doubt yourself? You know they lie." Daniel froze, his heart pounding. He should have walked away, but the words pulled him closer. The guard's glowing eyes followed his every move, and Daniel pretended to check his datapad. Hiding his trembling hands back in his quarters, Daniel could not contain the storm inside him. Every rule he had been taught as a doctor told him to obey, to trust the reports, to follow orders, but every instinct told him something else, that the aliens feared the truth more than they feared madness. And if that whispering voice was truly a princess, then she was not only a victim, but a threat to whoever had betrayed her. The next day, Daniel sat in the observation room with 2 other doctors, watching patients through one-way glass. The others spoke calmly, their voices flat, discussing medicines and progress charts. But Daniel's mind was elsewhere. He wondered if the princess could see him now, if she knew he was already questioning everything. And in that moment of silence, he swore he felt her presence inside his head, as if her thoughts brushed against his own. Not words this time, but a feeling, a spark of hope passing between 2 strangers. Daniel blinked and shook himself, trying to dismiss it. Perhaps it was only exhaustion. Perhaps it was madness creeping into him too. But deep inside, he knew it was not. The doubt had grown into belief. Belief that she was sane. Belief that she was speaking the truth. And belief that he, a single human doctor, might be the only one who could free her. The ward no longer felt like a hospital to him. It felt like a stage where a secret war was unfolding in silence. And Daniel, whether he wanted it or not, had already stepped onto that stage. The night was unusually quiet, the ward's alarms silent, and the corridors dim. Daniel sat in his small quarters, staring at the medical file on his desk. Every line in the report screamed of control, not care. The suppressants she was given were strong enough to silence even the sharpest mind. He knew it was against every rule, But his doubt had grown too heavy to ignore. Slowly, with trembling hands, Daniel prepared a new dose, weaker than what was ordered. He told himself it was only an experiment, a small test to see if the reports were true. But in his heart, he knew the truth. He wanted to hear her voice again. He wanted proof that she was not insane, and more than that, he wanted to know why they feared her so much. When he entered her chamber, the guards gave him the same cold stare. He bowed his head, pretending to follow routine, and injected the new dosage. The princess lay on her bed, her silver restraints glowing faintly, her eyes half closed as if lost in a dream. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, her eyes opened, glowing with a faint light that seemed alive. Her lips parted, and for the first time, she spoke with strength. "You reduced it," she whispered. Her voice soft but sharp like crystal. Daniel froze. His breath caught. She was not raving, not broken. Every word carried weight. Every sound filled the room with quiet power. "You are not like them," she said, her eyes fixed on his. "You listened." Daniel felt his heart race. He wanted to deny it, to hide behind his duty. But the truth was too clear. "Yes," he whispered back, though his voice shook. "Who are you?" he asked. Though he already knew the answer, her lips curved into the faintest smile, a smile filled with sorrow. "I am Princess Serenia of the Luthari Empire," she sighed. "And I have been betrayed." The words hit Daniel like a storm. A princess, locked away in a psychiatric ward, hidden from her own people. "Why are you here?" he asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Because I know the truth," she said, her voice trembling now, but not from madness. "They say I am mad, but I am not. I saw what they fear. I saw what they hide." Her chains clinked as she raised her hand slightly, the metal glowing against her pale skin. "They keep me drugged, so my mind cannot reach beyond these walls. So I cannot tell others," she said. Daniel leaned closer, his doubt turning into belief with every word. "What truth?" he asked, his whisper urgent. She looked at him, her eyes filled with fire and grief. "The war is not what it seems," she said. "And your kind humans are the key they cannot control." Daniel's chest tightened. Her words carried danger, but also meaning. "Why me?" he asked, his voice low. "Because you dared to doubt," she answered, her gaze piercing his soul. "Because your mind is free from their net. You are not bound by their lies." For a long moment, silence filled the chamber, the hum of the machines, the soft glow of the restraints, all faded into nothing. Only her words remained, heavy and alive. Daniel realized then that the whispers he had heard before were not madness. They were fragments of truth breaking through the drugs. And now that he had lowered her dosage, her real voice had returned. "You must be careful," she said suddenly, her voice urgent. "They watch you. They already suspect. They know humans see too much." Daniel swallowed hard, fear crawling through him. But alongside the fear was something new, a spark of courage, a sense of destiny. For the first time, he no longer saw her as a patient. He saw her as a prisoner of lies, and himself as the only one who could set her free. When the guards returned, Daniel had already stepped back. The princess closed her eyes again, pretending to be weak. But before her lids shut completely, she whispered one last word. "Soon," she said, her voice barely audible, and in that single word, Daniel felt both a promise and a warning. That night, as he lay in his bed, he could not sleep. The truth burned inside him. The princess had spoken, and nothing would ever be the same again. The next day, Daniel felt the walls of the ward closing in on him. Every guard's stare lingered longer than before. Every camera seemed to follow his steps. He carried his medical kit as usual, but his thoughts were far away, circling around the princess's words. "Humans are the key they cannot control." The sentence burned in his mind, heavy with meaning he did not yet understand, when he entered her chamber again. The guards stood silent, watching him closely. He performed the same routine, checked her vitals, adjusted her restraints, all while pretending to follow orders. But once the guards stepped outside, Daniel leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You spoke of a truth," he whispered. "What did you mean?" The princess opened her eyes slowly, her gaze sharp yet filled with sorrow. Her voice was soft but carried a weight that pressed against Daniel's chest. "They fear me because I know their weapon," she said. Daniel frowned. "Unsure. Weapon?" he asked. "What kind of weapon?" She lifted her head slightly, her chains rattling with emotion. "Not of metal or fire," she said, "but of thought." Daniel felt a chill crawl down his spine. "A mind weapon," he whispered. She nodded slowly, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "They call it the mind net," she said. "It spreads across entire worlds. A psychic web that bends thoughts, reshapes beliefs, and chains entire species into obedience." Daniel's breath caught. If such a thing was real, then every war, every treaty, every surrender could have been forced, not chosen. He leaned closer, struggling to process it. "And humans?" he asked. "What about us?" Her lips curved into a faint, broken smile. "You cannot be caught in it," she whispered. "Your minds are silent to their net, resistant to the chains that bind others. You are the one thread they cannot weave." Daniel's chest tightened, a storm of fear and awe colliding inside him. If she was right, then humans were not just another species in the galaxy. They were a threat to an empire built on control. "That is why they fear you," she continued. "Because you can see me, hear me, and not be bent by their lies." Her voice grew sharp now, her chains clinking as she leaned forward. "That is why they fear your kind, human, because you cannot be enslaved the way others are." Daniel swallowed hard, his pulse racing. The pieces fit together now: the excessive medication, the constant surveillance, the lies in the reports. They were not healing her, they were silencing her. If her words spread, if others learned the truth, the empire's control would shatter. And Daniel realized with sudden horror that by helping her, he was already marked. "You must decide," she said, her voice urgent now. "You can walk away, obey their rules, live as a servant of their lies, or you can help me escape, and together we can burn their web." Daniel's breath came shallow, his mind torn between fear and duty. To free her meant betraying the aliens who trusted him with this position. But to leave her here meant betraying not only her, but his own species. The door suddenly hissed open, and the guards stepped inside. Daniel snapped upright, pretending to be adjusting her restraints. The princess closed her eyes instantly, her body going limp as though the suppressant still ruled her. The guards gave Daniel a long, suspicious look before gesturing for him to leave. He nodded, his hands trembling, and stepped out into the corridor. As he walked away, he could still hear her words echoing in his head. Humans cannot be chained. The forbidden secret had been spoken. And now Daniel carried it with him. The ward no longer felt like a prison for her alone. It was a prison for the truth itself, and Daniel knew, with dread and courage mixed in his heart, that he was already part of something far greater than himself. Daniel could no longer see the ward the same way. Every door looked like a cage, every guard looked like a jailer. Every light above seemed to watch him with suspicion. The truth the princess had shared weighed heavy on his chest. The aliens were not protecting her, they were hiding her. And if what she said about the mind net was real, then humanity itself was already in danger. That night, Daniel sat alone in his quarters, his datapad glowing faintly in the dark. He opened restricted files, his fingers trembling as he bypassed layers of coded locks. The more he searched, the more he found proof hidden between the lines, medical reports rewritten, surveillance logs edited, entire files deleted and replaced. The lies ran deep, and every lie pointed to the same truth. The princess was not insane. She was silenced. Daniel began to draw a map of the ward, every corridor, every locked door, every guard rotation he had observed over the past weeks. He studied the pattern of power cuts, the maintenance schedules, Even the times when alarms briefly reset for testing, it was dangerous, reckless even. But in his heart the decision was already made. He could not leave her here, not when he was the only one who knew. The following day, when he entered her chamber, he kept his face calm, his voice steady. The guards were still there, watching him with those cold, glowing eyes. He checked her restraints, adjusted her dosage again, lowering it just enough for her to stay awake. When the guards finally stepped outside, he leaned close and whispered, "I believe you," he said, his voice firm this time. Her eyes opened slowly, glowing softly in the dim light, and for the first time she looked at him not with sorrow, but with hope. "You are ready," she whispered. Daniel nodded, though fear still twisted inside him. "I will get you out," he said, the words trembling from his lips but carrying a fire that surprised even him. Her chains rattled as she shifted slightly, her gaze sharp and determined. "They will hunt you," she warned. "They will brand you a traitor. Your own kind will fear you as much as they fear me." Daniel's jaw tightened, his heart pounding. "Then let them," he said quietly, "because if I do nothing, humanity will fall without ever knowing why." For the first time, the princess's lips curved into a faint smile, a smile not of victory, but of trust. "Then listen," she whispered. "The ward is more than it seems. It is not only a place of silence, it is a fortress, a testing ground, a prison wrapped in the skin of a hospital." Daniel leaned closer, his pulse racing. "What do you mean?" he asked. "There are hidden chambers below," she explained, "where they test the mind net on captured species. They study obedience, they refine their weapon, and they use me as their anchor." Daniel felt his stomach twist. The ward was not only her cage, it was the very heart of the weapon she feared. If she stayed, the mind net would grow stronger, and if she escaped, the Empire's secret would collapse. He clenched his fists, the weight of his choice pressing harder. "I will need your help," he whispered, her glowing eyes locked with his. "Then trust me, human, and I will show you the way over the next few days." Daniel worked in silence. He timed the guards' rotations with precision, memorized every blind spot in the cameras, and smuggled small items into his quarters: keys, codes, stolen access cards, even a guard's uniform piece by piece. The risk grew with every step, the stares of the aliens sharper, their suspicion thicker. Yet Daniel hid his fear behind calm eyes and steady hands. Each time he returned to the princess's chamber, he shared another detail of the plan, and each time her gaze grew brighter. One evening, as he stood outside the locked door, he noticed fresh writing carved faintly into the wall. This time, it was not the old warning of "she must not awaken," but something new, written in shaky lines, almost like a secret gift. "The human will free me." Daniel's chest tightened, his doubt melting into determination. The escape plan was no longer just his secret, it was their shared promise. He walked away from the ward that night, knowing his life would never return to normal. Soon the alarms would sound, soon the chase would begin. But deep in his heart, Daniel felt the fire of something greater than fear. He was no longer just a doctor, no longer just an observer. He was a human standing against an empire of silence. And the plan to free the princess was already in motion. The ward slept under the false calm of midnight. The lights above dimmed, the hum of machines softened, and the corridors stretched into silence. But Daniel's heart pounded like a drum inside his chest. Tonight was the night he would risk everything. He moved through the hall with steady steps, his stolen clearance card hidden in his sleeve. Each camera blinked red as it scanned him, yet none raised alarms. He had studied the system long enough to know the exact moments when the feed looped. The guards were on their rotation, and for a brief window, the corridors belonged to him. When he reached her chamber, his breath caught. The two silver-skinned wardens were gone, called away to a false signal he had triggered minutes earlier. Daniel swiped the card, the locks hissed, and the heavy door slid open. Inside, the princess lay as before, chains glowing faintly against her wrists, her eyes half shut from the Drugs, but when she saw him, they opened wide, shining with hope. "It is time," Daniel whispered. She nodded weakly, her voice low but steady. "I will walk, but you must remove the dampeners. They are what weakens me." Daniel's hands shook as he keyed in the codes, the restraints shivering with sparks before unlocking. The sound was sharp in the silence, and for a heartbeat, Daniel feared the entire station had heard. But no alarm came, only the heavy sound of his own breathing. The princess rose slowly, her movements stiff but graceful, like a queen in chains. For the first time, Daniel saw her true presence, the aura of command that clung to her every gesture. "You have done what no one else dared," she whispered. "Now you must not falter." Daniel nodded. Though fear clawed at him, he guided her into the corridor, the two of them moving swiftly through the shadows. They passed one guard station without being seen, but as they turned the next corner, a warden stepped out, its glowing eyes narrowing in suspicion. Daniel froze, his blood running cold. Princess lifted her hand, her eyes flashing bright. For a moment, the alien stiffened, its weapon half raised, then it collapsed against the wall. Unconscious, Daniel stared at her, breathless. "You still have power," he whispered. "Not all," she replied, her voice firm. "But enough." They hurried on, slipping into a maintenance shaft that led downward. The air grew colder, the walls damp with condensation, the sound of humming. Machines echoing all around them. Daniel realized this was the hidden level she had spoken of, the place where the mind net was tested, through the grates. He glimpsed chambers filled with strange devices, alien prisoners hooked to machines, their eyes blank and lifeless. The sight made his stomach twist. "This is what awaits your kind," she whispered, her voice filled with sorrow and rage. "If we do not escape." They crawled through the shaft, emerging into a narrow corridor that led to the docking bays. But just as Daniel swiped his card again, the alarm blared. Red lights flooding the hall. "They know," the princess said sharply, her chains clinking as she steadied herself. "Run!" Daniel hissed, grabbing her arm. The doors slid open, and the two bolted through, the sound of heavy boots thundering. Behind them, energy bolts scorched the walls as guards fired, the air crackling with heat. Daniel ducked, pulling the princess behind a column as sparks rained down. His lungs burned, his heart roared, yet he kept moving. Every second felt like borrowed time. The docking bay loomed ahead, its massive doors sealed tight. "Override," Daniel gasped. Shoving the stolen codes into the panel, the system groaned, lights flickering. But the doors began to part with a grinding hiss. Beyond them, the vast dark of space glimmered with stars, and a single shuttle waited, forgotten in the corner. The princess's eyes shone with fierce determination. "We are almost free," she whispered. But the sound of armored boots grew closer, the guards closing in fast. Daniel clenched his jaw, standing between her and the enemy, his body trembling but unyielding. For the first time he understood the weight of his choice. This was not only her escape, it was his too, not freedom of body, but freedom of truth. And in that moment, Daniel knew he would fight until the end, because sometimes courage was not about winning, but about daring. To try. The docking bay shook with the sound of alarms, red lights flashing across the steel walls. The great doors were only halfway open, their grinding echo drowned by the march of boots drawing closer. Daniel stood in front of the princess, his body tense, his breath sharp, his heart racing like thunder. The guards poured into the hall, silver armor glinting, weapons raised, their glowing eyes locked on him. "Go," Daniel whispered to her, his voice firm even as fear twisted inside him. The princess shook her head, her chains clinking as she stepped closer, her eyes fierce with fire. "They will kill you," she said, her voice breaking. "Do not throw away your life for me." Daniel met her gaze, and in her eyes he saw not a prisoner, not even a princess, but someone who carried the weight of countless lives. "If you escape, the truth escapes with you," he said, his voice steady. and that is worth my life." The guards advanced, their weapons humming with deadly energy. Daniel grabbed the fallen blaster from the ground, his hands trembling but his grip firm. He had never been a soldier, never trained for war. Yet in this moment he stood taller than any warrior. He fired once, twice, the blast striking the walls, forcing the aliens to scatter. "Run!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the bay. The princess hesitated for only a heartbeat before turning toward the shuttle. Her steps were fast but heavy with sorrow, each chain still clinking as she moved. Daniel fought to buy her time, ducking behind columns, firing wildly, forcing the guards to focus on him. Each second felt like a lifetime. Every shot drawing the enemy closer. His lungs burned, his arms ached, but he did not stop. The shuttle's engines roared to life, its lights glowing as the systems came online. The princess's voice carried over the chaos, strong and commanding. "Daniel!" she cried, her voice sharp with emotion. "Come with me." For a moment he almost ran for the shuttle, almost grasped the chance for freedom. But then he saw the guards breaking formation, rushing past him toward her, and in that moment his choice was sealed. Daniel threw himself into their path, firing until the blaster overheated. His voice roaring in defiance, the guards swarmed him, energy bolts searing the air, but he did not fall back. He was only a human, fragile in body, but in spirit he was iron, and his courage alone was enough to hold them long enough. The shuttle lifted from the ground, its engines shaking the bay. The great doors finally opened wide, revealing the endless dark of space. The princess stood inside the ship, her glowing eyes locked on Daniel, her face etched with sorrow and pride. In that final moment, as the guards closed around him, Daniel saw her whisper something. Though he could not hear the words, he felt them in his heart. "You are the reason hope still lives." With a final burst of fire, the shuttle shot forward, disappearing into the stars. The alarms echoed, the guards roared. But Daniel smiled through the chaos, because he knew she was free. And with her, the truth was free too. And though his story ended there, his courage had already become more than his life. It had become a spark, a fire, a whisper that no empire could ever silence.